I want to start by introducing Kimberly Hines. She's the clinical coordinator at Child Watch, and she's been here about 2 years. And I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more in a little while before she starts. But I also want to introduce Michelle Hawkins. Michelle, if you want to say hi and wave so they can see your face and know who you are. She's our newest counselor. And she will be here at our Paducah office and then also at the Marshall County office. So I want to give you a little bit of background on how me and Kimberly kind of came up with the idea to do a training for you all. We've been talking for quite a while about how to improve just our communication with the therapists and improve our recommendations to the court. And also just improve the information that we gather to share to the report. So we came up with a mental health progress report that we created on a Google form, and I'm going to share that with you all. It's a form that we can send the link to the therapist, so whether that's Kimberly or Michelle or maybe even a therapist in a different agency. The beginning asks for the provider name and the provider agency, so it does not have to be a Child Watch therapist. And then it will give a little bit of background information about the child. So it lists their name, the frequency of the appointments scheduled. So do they come every other week or do they come every week? Things like that. And it also will list the dates of contact. So we can see, are they making all of their scheduled appointments? Are they canceling or no showing? Are we is the therapist having to call to try to get them to come in? So I think that'll be helpful. It lists their current diagnoses, their current medication if known, a little bit about their treatment plan, a well-being assessment, whether or not the therapist has had contact with any caregivers or parents. And then there's a place where the therapist can list any concerns or wishes regarding services, placement, visitation, and then any additional recommendations or information that the CASA should know. So I just wanted you to see this form and just be aware that now we have a form that we can use to gather information from our mental health providers. So when your court case is coming up a few weeks beforehand, make sure that you get that link and can send it out so you can get that information for your report. So we're going to send that link as well on the February news that we send out. And then we can send it any other time you want to see it. So just let us know. So I'm going to let Kimberly go ahead and share. She's got a lot of good information for us today. And if you want to start, just tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know you've had some great work experience before coming to Child Watch. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that, then I'll let you take it away. So thank you.
Well, first I want to thank everyone for being here today. I'm so excited to kind of do this and increase that collaboration that we have with CASA. It's just one of the unique parts about Child Watch is that we've got these two different departments within the same building, and it can really enrich the level of care that we provide to our clients, the ones that we share, but hopefully it can help us to have even more of a connection so that there's more shared clients. So I'm really excited to do this. But I wanted to, like Stephanie said, give a little information about me. I have been working with this population, being children that have been abused and neglected. I've been doing this for about 7 years. Prior to getting my master's, I worked as a day counselor at a residential treatment facility for children that had been removed from the home due to neglect and abuse. And while working there, I just saw a great disconnect in the services they were getting. They were getting somewhat like Band-Aid treatment, and it wasn't preparing them to be either put back into the home in which they were removed or placed in a foster home. So I got a really strong calling to, oops, something's echoing. Is that better? Okay. So I got a really strong calling to go back and get my master's and become a therapist to this population. So ever since then, I have only worked with the population of abused and traumatized children. I was a therapist at a foster care agency prior to this for 3 years, and provided therapy to a lot of inner city Louisville kids, gang affiliations. They have already committed some major crimes in their life because they had been abused and their treatment had been, untreated for so long that they developed these survival instincts that unfortunately involved robbing and stealing and, meth distributing, just all kinds of things. And it was a great joy to work there. It really opened my eyes even more to the importance of getting, immediate care to trauma victims. Unfortunately, once they came into the foster care system, they had already been through quite a bit. So then when Child Watch opened up, I was super excited to come here because, a lot of our referrals come, directly after the trauma or during the stages in which there's, a suspicion of trauma. And so we're really able to get in there really quick and start providing that feedback and that intervention and that rapport, and building that trust before there's been years and years of trust broken. We can kind of get in there and help preserve some of that trust. So I've been working for Child Watch for 2 years now as a therapist, full-time therapist, and also the clinical coordinator. And it's just been an amazing responsibility, and just a great pleasure. So I want to kind of talk about what we do in our therapy program. I've talked to a lot of y'all individually, but there's several that I've never talked to or met before. So I'm sure basically what we do in therapy, but I kind of wanted to give you a little brief outline of just some of the techniques that we use. We obviously treat children that have been through any type of criminal trauma, so neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse, kidnapping in some occasions, malnourishment, just some of the harshest environments that a kid could live in. A lot of our clients have been through there. So it requires a lot of different techniques to kind of help them to kind of bring those traumatic experiences out so that they can work on them. So we use cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm sure y'all heard of that. And that has a lot to do with understanding the thoughts that are going on within a child's head, and understanding how thoughts affect emotions and how emotions affect behavior. And so you can kind of trace, one to the other. If you see a behavior, then you can start to look at, well, what are some of the thoughts that are fueling that behavior? Or if you see an emotion, what are some of the behaviors that are coming out? And it helps you kind of understand where the connection between their trauma and their behaviors are coming from. Because a lot of the times they are acting out because they don't have their voice. In some cases, they don't know what they're feeling. They don't have an adequate vocabulary basis to even describe what their feelings are. So one of the things we do is we teach them emotion words, the full range of them, not only anger, sad, mad, but surprise, disappointed, abandoned, neglected, worthwhile. You also want to teach them those positive emotions, loved, valuable, validated, just to increase their vocabulary so that instead of acting out to let you know how they're feeling, they can use their words to let you know how they're feeling. So that's a big piece of what we have to do. We also teach them how to recognize those emotions. Like, a lot of us as adults, we can say, okay, anxiety feels like a tightness in the chest, or it feels like a difficulty breathing. But for kids, anxiety feels like a stomach ache. And so you have a kid who's experiencing a lot of stomach aches, and you start looking maybe for a physical cause, but really there might be that mental cause going on. There might be anxiety because there is such a strong tie between the mind and the body, such that physical ailments can contribute to mental ailments and vice versa, mental ailments to physical. So you start looking at, okay, those stomach aches, let's talk about them. When do they happen? Are they happening when you're in the presence of someone? Are they happening when you feel pressure to perform? Are they happening whenever you feel you've let someone down? Because we can start to help them understand that those are their emotion warning signs. Those are their body's way of telling them that they're feeling this emotion and that they need to do something healthy to work through that emotion. So that's also another big part of what we do is teaching them how to recognize those signs, the signs of anger. You know, when we're getting angry, oftentimes we feel hot, or maybe our face starts to turn red, or we clench our fists. Those are your body's warning signs saying you're getting angry. We need to remove ourselves from the situation, or we need to start immediately going into some deep breathing to help us calm down. You know, it's very important that we have body awareness because it's so tied to the brain, as I said. So another thing we really do is we teach them that, and that's all through a lot of methods. I said CBT, but we also use art therapy. So a lot of times, if kids, when they're first learning those emotional words, they're not practiced at saying them, but they'll paint it. You know, so you can see their anger in their paintings, or you can see their fear in their paintings. And we do play therapy, which is, you know, we provide figurines, we provide kitchen sets, we provide puzzles, books, and it helps us to get a glimpse into how they view the world around them. If you have a child that's playing with a figurine and one figurine appears to be bossing or intimidating the other one a lot, that really gives you a great insight into how they perceive the world. Maybe they perceive men are dominating, or that men are scary, or that you know, women have to be quiet, or women have to you know, remain in the kitchen. You know, there's all kinds of different things that kids are taught in their environments, and you can see that kind of play out, and it leads you to prompt and ask questions. Well, I noticed that, you know, dad was yelling a lot. Is that something that you think happens in a lot of households? You know, it just gives you that insight. We also do family therapy. So that would be where not only we see the parent interacting with the child, watching how they set boundaries, how they set guidelines, how they speak to the child. We also coach the families. So a lot of times in their caregiver sessions, we're teaching them how to implement rewards, how to implement consequences, and how to implement those boundaries. But we're also teaching them how to recognize these signs within their kids that, okay, you know, kiddo just got done destroying the house, throwing things around. And maybe in a normal kid who hasn't experienced trauma, you could say that's a tantrum. But maybe for this kid who has experienced trauma, this is their cry for help. And so we want to train that parent to see that cry for help and respond to that cry for help in a therapeutic way, still setting boundaries. You know, just because a child's been traumatized, we cannot give them free passes, because the world will not give them free passes. They can't throw a tantrum in public and then expect to not have consequences just because they've gone through trauma. So we don't want to set our kids up for failure, but we do want to help, you know, address the situation with the understanding that this is a trauma response that they're having. And we want to help those parents know how to recognize and address those trauma responses. And then there's another, you know, there's a wide variety of treatments that we use. There's something called dialectical behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, positive psychology. I could go on and on. But relaxation is another really big one, where we teach them deep breathing skills, guided visualization skills, muscle relaxation skills, so that if they're in that moment and maybe they don't have an escape. So sometimes you could be sitting in school and you're having a trauma response, you're having a flashback, you feel like you're back in that traumatic environment again, and you can't flee the classroom. You've got to be able to sit in there and participate. But how do you do it? Well, deep breathing. No one can see you, but it's something that you learn to control your breathing, because yet again, the mind and the body are so connected that you can slow down the mind if you can slow down the body. So we teach them those techniques and how to just calm the body, how to relax the body. so that they are in a better state to address what it is that's going on in their minds right now, what kind of emotions they're having. Oh, someone just asked a question. What age children do you work with? We work with ages 3 all the way up, we say to 18, but we do have this kind of unwritten rule that if you've been with us and you turn 18, we'll kind of continue seeing you. You know, I've had a 21-year-older, but she's been at Child Watch since she was, 16. So we usually treat, though, between 3 and 18. A primary age group that we have is usually the 6 to about the 16 range. We see a lot of our kids fall within that range. So yeah, a wide variety. And like I said, a wide variety of just kind of the symptoms that we're treating. Because the other thing I wanted to go into is obviously we know that all of our kids that come through our program have been through some level of trauma, but we also have to keep in mind that they have other issues that they're experiencing, such as ADHD, PTSD, oppositional defiant disorder, depression, anxiety, mood dysregulation disorder. They have all those. Maybe it's a temperament they have before the trauma, or it could be a result of the trauma. Anxiety and depression obviously would be a natural response to trauma. If you feel hopeless and that the situation is not going to change. So it's very important to know what other kind of symptoms you're dealing with besides trauma symptoms, because you need to treat those as well. You can't holistically treat a child without treating the underlying symptoms that kind of play into that trauma response. So we use assessments to kind of figure out what else is going on. Observation, obviously, but we also have the ability as of the end of this past year and the beginning of this year, we're able to actually perform those hands-on assessments. So before, we did a lot of observation and, these brief questionnaires to determine if a child was also experiencing one of these other mental illnesses or mental health struggles. But now we've got actual assessments for ADHD and PTSD. We have something called the Child Behavioral Checklist, which assesses for a broad range of symptoms: anxiety, depression, oppositional defiant disorder, rebelliousness, impulsivity, all kinds of things. And we use that to not only help them get the accommodations that they might need in a school setting, because you're talking about a kid who maybe has been through abuse where they were expected to be perfect and have perfect grades. And now all of a sudden you plant them in a school setting and they're taking a test, and those thoughts just start coming. I got to make an A. If I don't make an A, what's going to happen? Am I not going to be loved? Am I going to possibly be beat for not doing well? And that starts to interfere with their ability to even look and answer at questions. Well, if we know that they've got these PTSD symptoms going on and we can provide documentation to the school, they can provide accommodations to that child that help them succeed in that school area. We don't want them to fail in the school area because they've had this trauma. We want to provide them with the opportunity to flourish and grow. They've already been set back. We don't want to set them back even more. So these accommodations can give them, quiet time when they take the test, extended time, someone to sit there with them and just be a presence, read to them. And so we can use these assessments to kind of help with that. We also use them to inform our treatment because, as we know, there can be barriers. I'm sure y'all have worked with your clients and you see there's barriers. If they're really distrustful, you automatically know that you have to start building that rapport, and maybe working really hard at it for a really long time before you start to see a little bit of that divulgence you're looking for. And that's common in kids that have a really high level of PTSD. And so you want to know, are there any barriers to your treatment? Because you want to address them. You want to not only treat that problem that they're experiencing, but you also want to remove as many barriers to that treatment as you possibly can. And so a lot of times That's a secondary thing we work on. We're not just working on the trauma, we're working on all those things as well. And I see someone said a chat. Okay, that was just from the what age we work with. And so a lot of times you'll see that we set goals for them that really involve emotion regulation skills. Obviously, that's a big one. How do you manage that anger? How do you manage that anxiety? We do interpersonal skills. If you've watched your mom and dad fight each other and beat each other up for most of your life, you maybe don't have a healthy understanding of what an appropriate, healthy relationship looks like. So we have to teach you that. How do you communicate? How do you express your feelings in a way that will be heard? How do you treat others? If you've been a victim of trauma, you may think that fists are the way to solve a problem. We want to teach you problem solving skills that don't involve your fists and your feet. So we have to do a fair amount of interpersonal skills. We also have to build self-esteem. A lot of these children's whole perception of themselves have been wrecked. They believe they're worthless, or they don't live up to expectations, or that they don't have any strengths. And so a big portion of what we do is helping them realize they're valuable, they're cared for, they're smart, they're strong, they're beautiful. We want to really build them up so that they can have the confidence they need to address the trauma. See, if you don't think you're capable of achieving, then you're going to live in what's called that learned helplessness state. I've always been this way. I've always been treated this way. So I don't expect anything better or different from anyone else. And that's where you see kids get in that cycle where they get in maybe a domestic violence relationship themselves because they just believe that that's what they deserve. And so we want to break that cycle. We want them to see their value and their worth. So that's some other things we talk about. And if anyone has any other questions, you feel free to ask them now or later. But I have a lot to say, so I'm going to keep going because I don't want to run out of time. And so then the next thing I was going to talk about was just the importance of the collaboration we have. We're not only treating the kids with the parents, but we get input from their physician or their teacher. And then CASA, obviously, we have a lot of individualized conversations with CASA. And that's so important because you've all heard the expression that it takes a village to raise a child. And that's what we're doing. We're all coming together and we're helping to bring the best outcome for this child. And so I really appreciate the collaboration we have with CASA. As I said, I think it's one of the most amazing things about our agency is that we're able to have that collaboration. But because of it, we do run into some issues where there are requests that are made that we can't necessarily fulfill. And so I wanted to kind of clear up some of that. We get a lot of requests from CASA to make recommendations about placement, whether we feel contact with that previous perpetrator should be cut off, or whether they should be allowed to have visits or phone calls. And while we certainly have opinions as therapists about what's healthy and what's probably best, or even personally what we want to see for that child, there's a big difference between what we want to believe, an opinion, and just that strong passion to protect our children, and what is really therapeutic or even ethical. So for instance, like, we can't necessarily say, no, they can't have any contact with this child, because if the state is deeming that they can have contact with their child, then what do I have that can support me going against that decision they've made? I have to have something solid. I have to have either seen an interaction between the parent and child, enough of them for me to get the strong opinion, wow, they don't seem to understand how to interact with this child. They don't set appropriate boundaries. They're too harsh. They're threatening. So I have to either, see that, or I have to have enough conversations with the caregivers to know what do they think is appropriate punishment, consequence. And I hate that word, punishment, consequences. What do they think is an appropriate consequence? Do they know how to offer rewards for positive behaviors? What are their expectations? because do they expect more than a child's able to deliver? That would obviously run into problems, because if that child is in a trauma response such that they can't deliver upon these high expectations, that's obviously going to create frustration among the caregiver, which could create problems and cause them to kind of roll back into that previous cycle of abuse. But in order to understand that, I have to have more contact. So there's just some limitations that happen. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but we have to be very careful. Anyone working with a child, we have to be very careful that we don't step outside the scope of what our practice is, because it really does set us up for some liability issues. If you make a claim about a parent that they're not fit to see their child or parent their child, but you've never spoke to that parent, you've never conducted an assessment on that parent, then you're kind of set up for being sued for defamation of character. And I mean, you can imagine there would be some strong feelings on the part of that parent, because they want to see their child and you're stopping them, and you're stopping them because of a character assessment you've made. So they're going to come pretty strongly back at you. So if you are going to make any type of assessment like that, you got to have the data to back it up. It's just like a doctor. If I were to go into a doctor today and say, I think my ankle's broken, the doctor's not going to just look at it and say, yep, your ankle's broken. Let's do something about this. What are they going to do? X-rays. They're going to X-ray it. Then they're going to send it to a lab technician who's going to read the X-ray, who's going to then confirm, yep, the ankle's broken. And then the doctor's going to make recommendations on care. If you go in with flu, he doesn't just look at you and say, yeah, I think you have flu. Let's just start prescribing Theraflu. He's going to perform a test to see, are the symptoms of the virus for the flu present? So it's the same way with therapists. We have to have that hard data that is able to back up any claims that we make. So like I said, either interactions or, just an elaborate fear response on the part of the child anytime they're going to have contact. We can look into that. And that kind of brings up another issue, though. Just because a child is having a fear response doesn't automatically mean that you want to pull away that contact, because you might be robbing them of that cathartic experience of release, that they're actually safe. See, if you have a fear of something, let's say a fear of monkeys. A monkey attacked you one day and it just bit you and you bled. So now you're deathly afraid of monkeys, right? Most of the time, you don't have to worry about encountering a monkey, because they're not running around in your yard. You're not pets. You're not going to the regions where monkeys live that often. So you can have this fear response and be perfectly fine, because you're not being exposed to your fear response. Well, say I decide that you now have to take care of this pet monkey. You're probably going to have a rather traumatic fear response. Like, you're going to remember the monkey biting you and bleeding, and you're going to have anxiety. If I take that monkey away immediately and say, okay, let's just not ever put you near a monkey again, you're going to have that constant fear of that monkey. But say I give you that monkey and it's different. It's not the same monkey that bit you. It's a kind, gentle, loving monkey. And you spend some time with it and you start to realize, okay, like, it's not what I built it up to. It's not that scary. I'm safe. Oh my goodness, I survived a whole day. I was around a monkey. I didn't die. I was around a monkey. I didn't get bit. I survived. Well, think about that as the parent. They've been around the parent. It's a fearful response. They've been pulled from the home. They're safe. They're not around the parent anymore. They're not exposed to the parent. But I bring the parent around, you're going to have that fear response, because they are going based off their memory. It has been ingrained within their body to have that fear response. But what if that parent's changed? What if that parent really has taken to heart the lessons they've learned in that parent training, and they've really invested on being better for that child? We don't want to rob the child of that experience to see, okay, like, I'm still safe. That parent has changed. or maybe just see that you can be safe in the presence of that parent. Like, you don't have to immediately have a panic attack in which you're shaking and trembling at the sight of that parent, because you have an experience of being in that parent's presence, surviving, and seeing that you're safe, nothing happened. So sometimes we need to give our children that opportunity to go around that feared stimuli and see that nothing bad happened. And that will help them to erase their anxiety. See, just never being around your fear source, if you're afraid of that monkey and I never bring it around you, you're never addressing your anxiety. You're avoiding your anxiety source. And that anxiety will continue to live within you. But if you are exposed, we call it exposure therapy. If you are exposed to that fear source and you see that it can have a positive outcome, then you can start to release some of those ingrained anxiety responses, because they're ingrained within our body and our mind. Um, Sometimes without even realizing it, we tense up because we're around our fear source. And so we just need that cathartic experience to see that we're okay. So there's a lot of reasons that we have to sometimes say no to making a direct recommendation regarding visitation and contact. And then the other reason, we want to make sure that we're right about that interaction. So, how can you know you're right unless you kind of witness and experience it? If we never allow contact with the caregiver, we never know if the caregiver's really made changes, because they're never given an opportunity to demonstrate their new level of parenting abilities and their new level of anger control. So sometimes we have to give them that opportunity to prove to us that they've made changes. But if we automatically pull contact away, we don't get that. So obviously, there's never a hard no, there's never a hard yes on recommendations we'll make. But it does seem to be somewhat of, like an issue that we run into that I kind of wanted to explain a little bit more. And if anyone has any questions about it, ask me individually, because we're not going to automatically say no to making a recommendation. But just know that if we don't automatically say yes, and then we maybe do say no, that there is a legitimate reason. We want to do what's best for the kid. And so sometimes what's best for the kid is to allow that contact. It's just a case by case basis. So another question that kind of comes up is, well, if you need to see that experience, if you need to see that interaction between parent and child, why not incorporate that parent into the therapy session? And in theory, that's great. That really does work. And that is a goal. Hopefully, if reunification is on the table for this kid, we do want to have those interactions to be monitored and coached by a therapist. But initially, it's not such a great idea, because we're establishing rapport with our clients at the very beginning. I always kind of give a rough estimate that you need 6 sessions, so 6 interactions with a child, in order to build the level of rapport and trust that you need. So that's what we work on our first 6 sessions. Of course, we get in a little bit to, the trauma and the other symptoms such as ADHD, but it's really heavily built on rapport building, because they don't know me. You may know me, mom may know me, mom may have trust in me, mom might think I'm credible, that I'm a good therapist, but kiddo doesn't have any, no proof that I'm good at what I do or that I care for them. My licensure, I have a fancy license, but it doesn't mean anything to a kid. It doesn't automatically mean that I'm going to be there for them to them. So I have to prove myself. I have to prove my credibility. I have to prove that I can help them, that I want to help them, and that I can be trusted. And so that is important for my first session. I can't add in someone that could potentially create fear within the kid, because then I can't gain their trust and their safety. Before we introduce someone that could create an anxiety within them, they need to know that I've heard them. I validate their emotions. A lot of kids they were not validated, especially by their caregivers who were abusing them. They did not get validation. Okay, you're allowed to feel sad about this. You're allowed to feel angry about this, and you're allowed to be angry. Anger is not an emotion that we want to suss out of our kids and our population. Anger is a very valid emotion that's sometimes very healthy. We want to learn healthy ways to express that anger, but we don't want to get rid of that anger. So we want to let the kid know, hey, it's okay that you're angry, and it's okay that you sometimes want to punch a pillow. That's okay. They need to know that we'll protect their privacy. They're going to tell me something. I'm not going to automatically run out to caregiver and tell caregiver everything that's been said. They need to know that I value their opinion, that they are just as much a part of that therapy session as I am. I'm not, even though I've got the training, I'm not the expert on that child. That child's the expert on that child. And so they need to teach me who they are. They need to teach me how I can best respond to them. It's a learning process. And then lastly, I have to be their voice. They have to know that they can trust me, that if they don't have a voice, that I will be the voice for them, or that I will equip them to have a voice, to say what they need to say. Well, if you're bringing in a parent and you're really wanting to fix that relationship, a kiddo needs to be comfortable saying what it is they need to see differently from mom or dad. They need to be able to say, Mom, you scare me when you yell and scream, or Mom, the very thought of seeing you touch a wine glass automatically creates fear within me because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if you drink too much. Or, they need to be able to tell the parent what it's done to them. Like watching you and dad fight the way you did has really made me not trust anyone. I don't trust men, or I don't trust women. They need to be able to say that. And so once they're comfortable with me and they know that I'm going to be the safety object in the room, I'm going to keep things safe and appropriate and therapeutic, then we can invite that parent in, and get into some really good therapeutic work, because we know now that the kid knows their feelings, understand their feelings, accepts their feelings, and is willing to vocalize their feelings. And that's very important in order for healing and change to be made. So once that's been kind of established and worked through, then obviously we want to try to get bio parents in. But I want to also say that during this time when we're not inviting bio parents in to the actual therapy, but we know they're heavily involved in the kiddo's life, that is when we are still providing parenting tips and coaching to that bio parent. So there's one kiddo that's in the CASA program, and he's currently placed with relatives, but his father has a visitation with him on a 2-week basis. And the family would love to keep the kiddo, but they know there's a possibility that the kiddo will be sent to the bio family. So they want him to have a good relationship with dad. And so I want dad to have a good relationship with kiddo, but I also want to know if dad knows how to have a good relationship with kiddo. So during this time, I'm also training dad. So for instance, with this dad, I ask him basic questions such as, if you have kiddo back in your home full time, who's your child care? Who's going to help you if you are sick and you can't watch your child, or you get called into work? Or do you know what to do if your child, falls and busts their head or cuts their finger open? Do you know how to provide appropriate consequences? So we kind of suss that out and then provide that intervention to them, so that when they get that interaction with the child, they're already prepped. So that, say they do get introduced into the therapy setting, or the child is returned to them full time, they're already prepped, so that that first interaction of being with, on their own in that role is a positive one. We want them to already kind of have some of those skills. That way, say I invite dad into the session, but I haven't worked with him prior, dad could come in and offset some of the work that I've already done with kiddo. But if I've already prepped dad on what's appropriate to set as an expectation or a consequence, then when he comes into the therapy setting, he helps maintain that therapy setting, that therapeutic environment, and hopefully enriches it. So there is a lot of parent training that goes on. And I think as CASA, those are great questions if you are interacting with bio family to kind of help them. And, it doesn't have to be an overt thing. It's not, what is your plan or who's your child care? It's, sometimes we use personal, so you'll say, oh man, I remember raising kids. It always seems like they're getting boo-boos and cuts all the time. Have you experienced that yet with your little one? And that gives them an opportunity to say, well, yeah, yesterday Johnny, cut his finger on a can. Oh, well, what did you do? And that gives you that opportunity to see, well, what did they do? Was it appropriate? And if it wasn't, then you go, oh, well, I found that it's really helpful too. And then you provide that input. So, clever ways, relationship building, I would say, is just as important. Just like we're building that relationship with kiddo as therapists, as CASA, we have to build that relationship with the parents as well, so that they don't feel like we're critiquing them or that we're coming from a position of authority over them or that we have superiority over them. We want them to know we're in there with them. We're trying to help them. We're helping the child. We know that to help the child, we have to help the parent, because the parent is going to be the one to implement all the stuff that we've been doing with the child. You can give all the tools necessary. I like to equate it to a recipe. If I provide a kid with all the skills they need, I'm providing those ingredients. I'm teaching them how to use it, teaching them how to whip up that batter. But if nobody ever actually implements it, like uses the recipe, you're not going to get a good result. And so, with parents, it's the same thing. We need to give them the skills and help them have that practice to implement them. And so you want a good relationship with your caregiver so that they feel comfortable telling you where they struggle. That way you can help them with input. Oh, well, they admit that they have a really difficult time managing their own anxiety when kiddo's throwing a tantrum on the floor. Wow, if you don't have a relationship with them, they're not going to be vulnerable enough to share that information with you. But if you have a relationship with them, then they feel I can be vulnerable and this person's not judging me. They're not reporting me. They're trying to help me. That can help the parent, which then helps the kid, because a parent's mental health has a direct impact on their child's mental health. So relationship building is very, very important within all settings, the kids, the caregivers, the school, anybody that's in the care of the kid, you want to have a good relationship with, so that they're giving you that information as it's happening, so that you can incorporate it into your therapy right then and there, or into, as CASA, into your interactions with the kiddo right then and there. And then another thing I wanted to really talk about, just on a therapy and a CASA side, is the fact that we don't want to provide crutches to our clients. We don't want to be their crutch. We have to equip them, but also on some level allow them to fail, because it's through failures that they learn what to do different next time. I say, like, you're not going to immediately jump in a pool and know how to swim. You have to practice. You have to try and fail sometimes. The same thing with riding a bike. I've never met anyone who jumped on a bike the first time and rode it perfectly. Now, we as parents will hold on to that bike and we will run alongside them. But eventually, what do we have to do? We have to let go. Because if we're always holding the bike for them, they're not doing it on their own. They're not being given that empowerment that they can do it, that they don't need someone else to come in all the time and rescue them or save them. that they can do it themselves. So at some point, as a therapist or as a CASA or anyone involved in a kid's life, we have to take our hands off the bike and let them pedal by themselves. And if they fall and get a few bumps and scratches, we're there to provide that love and that nurturance, but we encourage them to get back up there and try again. We don't say, oh, that's okay. We don't ever have to do that again. No, we want them to know that they can do it. They have no reason to be afraid. So just remember that too, that a kid failing, or maybe even a parent failing sometimes, of course, you know, there's limits. Obviously, we're not allowing anything harmful to happen. But if a parent isn't, you know, doing something perfectly, realize that's their learning opportunity. They're learning through their mistakes, and we're there to help and coach them, but we're not there to take the reins back over, you know, start controlling. We're there to lift them, to say, hey, I know it was hard, I know it didn't go perfectly, but you can do it again, you can try again, you know, encourage them. So I really wanted to talk about that too, just understanding that with kiddos and parents, that sometimes we have to give them that space they need to actually implement what it is we've taught them. There's a time where you're in the classroom learning, and then there's a time when you're out there in the public, putting into action what you've learned. So obviously with therapy, there's a lot of, there's steps, you know, to get to that point to where you're letting them kind of go out on their own and make those mistakes and learn. That's towards the end, when we're in that maintenance phase of therapy. Because there's a lot of different steps. There's that rapport building, which I said, which is like that six sessions a minimum. And then, you know, then there's the skill grasping and slight alleviation of symptoms, which usually comes after 12 interactions. You start to see there's a little bit of an increase in mood. There's a little bit of an increase in self-esteem and impulse control. And then from there, you know, you're really getting into some really good meat. Teaching those skills in depthly, providing them with situations in which they have to exercise those skills, empowering them to know that they can use those skills. And then kind of pulling back a little bit and watching them use those skills, and just providing that supportive counseling as they use those skills. And then, you know, watching them kind of go out and flourish on their own. I always say with any kind of treatment with a kid, therapy wise, medication wise, in any intervention, is never meant to be a permanent thing. We don't want kids on medication for the rest of their life if it can be helped. We don't want kids in therapy for the rest of their life if it can be helped. We don't want kids in special education for the rest of their life if it can be helped. We're always working towards removing ourselves from their life a little bit, even as CASA or as therapists. We know that we've accomplished their goal if they don't need us anymore, you know, because we've equipped them, we've given them what they need, they're using the skills they need, they're out there, they're flourishing, they're thriving, they're not just surviving anymore. We know we've done our job because we have set them up to be independent and empowered, which is what we all should want, to be empowered and to be confident in ourselves, and to know that life is not going to be without problems. Our goal is never to rid our life of problems. Our goal sometimes is never to take anxiety out of the equation. Sometimes anxiety will be in your life, and it will be there, you know, when you're 80. But the goal is to know how to respond to that anxiety, how to cope with it, and how to lessen it, and how to problem solve. So it's the same thing with anything. It's problems are always going to be there. We're not trying to give a child an expectation that one day things will be perfect. No, we want them to know there's going to be trials and obstacles in your life, but you are capable of handling them. You are capable of solving those problems. You are a worthwhile individual, and you are an amazing contributor to society. You know, I really think that's a really important part of any work with child, is just empowering them, because some of that other stuff definitely falls in line once they feel that they can do it, that they can control themselves, that they can learn how to feel less anxious, that they can encounter that fear source and come out okay, that they can make new friends, you know, just so much. So that's basically all I really wanted to focus on, because I wanted to make sure that we had time for questions, and I could talk all day if you let me. So I tried to pare down just a little bit. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about the support group, and I'd really like an opportunity to kind of lead you guys through a relaxation therapy exercise, if we have the time. And I think we do. We have plenty of time. So I think we're going to open it up to questions. Any? I don't see any in the chat. If there are no questions, do we want to move into maybe? Oh, I hear someone.
Yes, I have one question. What type of therapy do you find works best in the smaller children, like age range, 4 to 6?
I'm trying really
Art
hard.
therapy, play therapy.
I want to be able to see. Is this Suzanne?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. My screen didn't automatically switch to you, so I wanted to make sure I could see you. So for younger kids, it is a lot of that play and art therapy, and then also teaching them those emotion words. So for instance, like a standard therapy technique that we always kind of use is we come in and we have a dollhouse, and we have a bunch of figurines for that dollhouse, and we let them set up the world, like put the furniture where they want, put the people where they want, kind of act it out, and just kind of ask the questions. Oh, what does mommy do in the home, or what's mommy doing right now? Or give them the opportunity to even put things where they may not necessarily go. Because another thing we want to do is give them some control. So just because my dollhouse looks like this is the room that the bedroom goes in, if you want to make that the kitchen, go ahead and make that the kitchen, because you can see a lot that they're telling you just by doing that they're wanting some control in their life, or they're wanting a different order. So we really provide them with activities that put them in the driver's seat. Where they're kind of leading. We call it play-based therapy because they lead the route of the session. And we also recommend that when parents are playing with their child. Child-centered play therapy is where they get to pick what you do. They kind of outline what you're going to do within that setting. You kind of repeat back to them some things that they're doing. So you make casual observations like, oh, I noticed that we're spending a lot of time getting our characters ready, brushing their hair and cleaning them. Or, you'll make comments about, oh, I see that we are going to have a fun play day. Is this something that you would like to do one day? Like, we have our friends over in this play scenario. Is this something you'd like to do in real life? I don't know. It's just kind of letting them lead it, because if I come in and tell a kiddo what we're going to do, I'm going to get a little bit of resistance, because like I said, I don't have any credibility with them yet. They don't know me. I'm a stranger. So why am I going to come in and just another authority figure telling them what to do and how to do it? So I like to give them that opportunity to lead it and have a little bit of control even over what I do, so that they see that this is a joint partnership between me and them, not just me telling them.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your questions. A lot of play therapy, a lot of art therapy. We paint, we color, we've made flowers out of paper before. We eat pretend food meals, some things you naturally do with your own kids. I have a kitchen set and food in my office, and we make pretend meals and they serve it to me, and I pretend like it's the most delicious gourmet meal I've ever had. And
Have you ever had the opportunity to use a live animal in any of your therapy sessions?
I have not yet, but Miss Michelle, who is on here, recently got a therapy dog, and she has been getting some releases from clients to introduce that little pup into the therapy setting, which I think is a great idea. So that is something that is being implemented within it, and it's awesome that we have that opportunity because kids feel sometimes when I'm doing session, I've got my little puppy in my lap and I'm scratching its ears while I'm doing a session. Because when you're working with traumatized kids, I think it's very important to realize the impact they have on you. We love these kids. You don't do this job in any capacity unless you love kids. So our heart goes out to these kids. It breaks for these kids. And so we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves while we're working with these kids, that we're utilizing self-care, that we're debriefing and unloading after interactions with these kids so that we're not carrying it from one place to the next, or in my situation, carrying it from one session to the next. I don't want to bring in that heaviness from the one session into the next session. I want to be refreshed. So for going into that new session. And so then, an animal offers that really awesome opportunity to kind of just relax and dig your fingers into its fur. And because even ending an interaction with a kiddo needs to end on a light moment. Even our sessions, we reserve the last 10 minutes for just a fun game or I play Would You Rather with a lot of my clients, because I don't want them to walk out of my office and, kind of carry what we've been talking about. I want them to, what we've talked about, we've resolved in that session. We don't want to leave anything hanging. Like there might still be overreigning issues, but whatever anxiety or fear you had in that session as a result of talking about your trauma experiences, that has to be resolved before a child even walks out the door, because they don't need to carry that from one spot to the next. And same thing with adults when you're interacting with a child.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I'm looking for you. It didn't automatically switch to you again. I don't know how to make it.
if you'll put it on not speaker view, but gallery view, you can see everybody.
I don't see that button. Okay, here, hold on. View.
I'm Jim
And
Gearhart.
view. No, I'm not seeing
Are you trying to find me?
it. Well, I accidentally made it like a really full screen. And so now everyone's just kind of jumbled together. I told you, I'm not good at technology. I wish we were doing this in person. I found you though.
Okay. Well, just a little background. I'm a retired minister, and I'm also concerned about the effects of bad religion, sick religion. So I was just wondering, have you ever had to deal with anything like that in terms of children that come to you? Have there been, kids come out of a religious cult or anything like that? If you had, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that actually has happened just a few times where they were involved. It wasn't the one that gets a lot of the media attention, which is where the kid is being offered as a sacrifice or anything. But they've come out of religions in which there were specific rituals that were done to target certain healing. So I had a kid who didn't really know how to address her emotions except for some incense. Like she was convinced that lighting a certain incense or a certain combination of incense was the best and only way to work through her feelings. There is a power in smell. I mean, I do believe in aromatherapy, but that is maybe a booster, something that helps enrich the experience, but you have to have emotion regulation skills. So skills on how to calm the body, skills on how to challenge negative, distorted thinking, skills on how to test out hypotheses. Like if you're depressed because you think no one likes you, test that out. Can I name 5 people that like me? Can I name 10 people that like me? How many people do I really have proof don't like me? Is it 5? Well, is that everybody in my life? No, I have tons of people in my life and maybe only 5 don't like me. There's so many things to learning how to regulate your emotions. But I have worked with a kiddo that believed that burning a certain scent was the only way. And that's difficult. That's very difficult because it's their religion. And you don't want to come in and tear down something that they've been taught to believe in, because automatically you lose that credibility. If you are going to tear down a family belief system, then you've lost a lot of that ability to gain trust and rapport. But at the same time, I've got to help that kiddo understand that that is not the only way or even the best way to learn how to regulate her emotions. And so I use my rapport with her to kind of help her see alternate ways and to point out ways that she is using. Okay, well, you say that the only way you regulate your emotions is by burning this particular scent. But you gave me an example last week in which somebody confronted you in a hateful manner and you walked away. That's an emotion regulation skill right there. The very fact that you walked away and let something go instead of holding on to it, man, you used emotion regulation skills in that instance. So you use a lot of different ways to regulate your emotions besides burning this particular incense. So, kind of things like that, kind of that subtle challenging, so that they realize that maybe what they've been taught is not the only way to kind of, but then there are some instances in which there are some harmful beliefs. They do come in with some harmful beliefs, and that's a little bit different of an issue. We have to help them instead of immediately coming in and saying why that's helpful or harmful to them. We kind of have to teach them what is healthy first so that they can understand why it's harmful. If I come in and say, I haven't encountered this yet, but I know it goes on in certain religious cults, bloodletting, where they cut themselves and they bleed. If I automatically come in and say cutting yourself and allowing blood to flow out is very harmful for you, that's going to be offensive to them. That's going to hurt my rapport with them. And I'm not going to get anywhere with them. I know it's harmful, but I know at the moment they're not in harm's way. They're not at risk of killing themselves or significantly damaging themselves. I know it's more like superficial cuts. So it's not an emergency situation where I've got to come in and do crisis counseling. But it is a situation where I have to teach them what's healthy ways to let out emotions, what is healthy for your body. The fact that, cutting those spots on like your arm, you're creating scars and you're potentially damaging cells, and you're damaging just your body's natural ability to respond to contagions, because you let down your immunity with things like that, because your body's thinking, oh my gosh, we've been harmed, we've been injured, and you put your body into a state of arousal by that kind of stuff. So kind of teaching them what is healthy behaviors so that they eventually ask the question, do you think it's harmful what I do to myself? And that gives you that opportunity. Well, yeah. And by that point, you've developed rapport and trust with them so that what you say, they actually believe and trust. You're not just targeting their long-held beliefs. Like I said, I've never encountered that so much, but it is something you have to keep in the back of your mind, because there are generational things that I had to work with a parent one time, and this isn't about religion, but was confused why she could not threaten to smack her child upside the face. She had made that threat in public, and somebody had called and reported her, and she could not understand why that was not okay. She said, I didn't slap the child, I just threatened to. And she said, my mama did that to me all the time. That was a tricky situation, because if I come in and automatically say, well, of course you can't threaten to smack your child, that's emotional abuse, I'm attacking her raising, I'm attacking the way she's raising her kids. So I have to kind of approach it from a setting of like, okay, well, I just want you to be aware of what the culture is right now. The culture is very aware of parenting right now. It's very aware of child abuse right now. And so even though in your mind, you know, you would never smack your child, an outsider doesn't know that. They think that you might actually smack your child. And so by hearing you say that, you cause alarm within them. So I'm telling her, we know you're not going to smack your child, but other people don't. So that we avoid conflict in the future, let's refrain from telling our child we're going to smack them, you know. I accomplished the same mission that way, right? Which is to tell the parent, please don't threaten to smack your child. That's not okay. But I had to teach her why society says it's not okay, so that hopefully eventually she will start to adopt that perception herself. And if she doesn't, at the very least, I've stopped her from engaging in a destructive behavior. Even if she doesn't believe it, my rapport has gotten her to stop doing it, because she now understands what the societal consequences of it are going to be. You know, so we always have to be careful of how we approach our audience, because we know the great thing about being a therapist or a CASA is that we're that non-biased person. You know, we didn't grow up in that environment. We haven't been raised according to those generational standards. So we can come in and see things for what they are. But that doesn't automatically mean that the family does. So we just have to be careful that we're teaching them. And I think I froze. Did I freeze?
I don't think so. Kimberly, Laura Skinner has a question for you as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't, I wish I knew how to work this thing, but yeah, let me find Laura Skinner real quick. There she is. All right. Hello.
I have a burning question about
Uh-huh.
attention deficit disorder.
Uh-huh.
I want to be able to communicate with one of my CASA kids in the best way, and he really struggles with this problem. He is on medication. Unfortunately, he's not seeing anyone at Child Watch.
Aww.
And the therapy hasn't been really consistent with him since he was removed from his mother. And anyway, I caught myself saying something to him the other day, and I knew it was a little bit coming from a biased perspective. And I went and did some research on ADHD, but I just really need either a good resource to go to or something about how do you speak when children are really just so fidgety and so they really just can't even really talk to you sometimes because their mind is going a million directions.
Yeah. I encountered this yesterday. So you are not alone. Even being the therapist with all my training, I have a hard time sometimes. I had a kiddo in my office yesterday, and he is CASA. And I was like, oh my, like I had to work super, super, super hard just to get a standard question answered. Absolutely everything in my office was touched. A lot of things that I wouldn't even think a kid would want to touch, he had his hands on. So it is a challenge. It is definitely a challenge. So some of the best interventions that I've had are automatically starting out saying, we're going to play this today. You can kind of set the stage for how we play with it, but I want to stick with this today. A lot of kids I can offer, what would you like to play today? You know, and they'll stick with one or two things. We'll clean it up and then we'll move on to something else. But with an ADHD child, they have a hard time making decisions. I mean, that's one of the issues with ADHD is you can't stay organized. So if I offer them, you know, a wide range of all the millions of toys I have in my office, that's overstimulating for them. So we have to kind of be more selective with them and say, hey, I've got either the doll set out today or I've got the puzzles out today. Which one would you like to do? And we're going to stick with that for a while. So if you're having that interaction with your CASA kiddo when you're doing an activity, come prepared with an activity already. Like, hey, I brought these foam snowmen, you know, Oriental Trading. I get all kinds of stuff off that because they'll come with the whole kit. And you take stickers off and you put it on. And by the time it's all said and done, you got a snowman complete with the eyes and the nose. And that keeps them engaged and invested without having them get too distracted on other things. Because you want a kid involved in an activity when you're going to interact with an ADHD child. They are not, some kids will sit in a chair and they will talk to you. Or some kids will just hold a toy and they'll talk to you. Or they will, you know, arrange. I have some kids that they come in and they start arranging the dinosaurs, like from biggest to smallest, but they're talking to me. An ADHD kid needs to have a hands-on, you know, activity you're doing because there's less, you know, stimulation and distraction. And then working with them on eye contact is really important. Say, okay, well, I'm talking to you. It is okay if maybe you want to fiddle with this toy a little bit, or you want to make this activity. But when you're going to answer me, why don't you stop and just look me in the eye for a few minutes and kind of tell me what your response is. That way, you know, they're listening. Because if I was, you know, going on and I'm basically saying, well, you know, are you really afraid that that mom's just going to disappear and never come back one day? That's a really important question that I want to know if they heard. So I need them to stop, make that eye contact with me. And even if it's just something like, yeah, I have that fear, then I know that we're on the same page, we're on board, and we're getting from point A to point B. It won't be a nice straight line with an ADHD child. I think we got to change our expectations. If we think that it will be nice and straight how everything else goes, it won't be. It'll be like this and this and this and this and this and this. But as long as you got from point A to point B, you know, pat yourself on the back. You are making a difference in that child's life because you're being a consistent source. And by consistency, that creates decreases in ADHD. I mean, one of the standard things to help an ADHD child is to have consistency. They need consistency. They don't do good with, you know, maybe we'll have a bath tonight, but maybe we'll have dinner at 9 o'clock tonight. No, dinner needs to be at 5. We need to have a bath. We need to know what our routine is because there's less likely for disruption. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I did read, I wanted to ask you about.
Am I froze?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No?
I can barely hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you, yeah. I don't know what happened.
I don't know. Everyone's frozen. It says my network bandwidth is low. Am I going in and out?
I hear you fine.
Oh, good. Good.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things I read was that children with ADHD really don't hear when somebody's asking them to do something. Sometimes they just don't hear it. Mm-hmm. And it's frustrating for the adult trying to say, you know, can you come pick up your toys or can you come to dinner or whatever? That sometimes they just don't hear that. And so I was wondering, do you ever teach caregivers to use any kind of I don't know, physical cue or some kind of, something to say, I'm talking to you right now. Because that's the first thing I thought of was like, what could their caregiver do to help them know that they're talking to them? I realized as a mom, when, I was raising my kids, I called them, I expected them to hear my whole paragraph,
Yeah.
from one end of the house to the other.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you can. So what you want to teach them, we teach them is how to get their attention and make sure you have their attention before speaking. And that can be accomplished through a visual cue, like you said, which is where you flip off the light and then back on, because naturally a kid is going to wonder, well, why did it go dark? And they're going to start to look for you. And you have their attention then. Another way is to obviously make sure you're down on their level and you're looking at them so they know you're talking to them. And so they have no excuse to say, well, I didn't know you were talking to me. But then another way is have them repeat back what you said, because you will say, okay, I need you to pick up your shoes. What did I say? And if they're like, I don't know, then you're like, I need you to pick up your shoes. What did I say? You need me to pick up my shoes. Yes, I need you to pick up your shoes. So sometimes you have to go back and forth. You have to do it 3 or 4 times. You just keep asking, what did I say? So yeah, you can do any numbers. Like I said, you could do a touch. So like make sure you touch their shoulder before you're going to talk. That way they're because what happens with an ADHD kid is they're living up here. They're not paying attention to their world and what's going on. They've got enough going on up here. So sometimes they need that body awareness to pull them back to the present. So a touch will take them out of their mind back into the body in the present moment. So that little touch on them, or placing something in their hand. There's been all kinds of things, like people will make the love sign, I love you, and lay that in their hand and wait to talk until the child makes the I love you sign back. And then they have their attention. Just whatever works with the kiddo specifically to let them become back aware that you're in the room, they're in the room, you're asking something of them.
thanks.
Good.
Kimberly, you had talked
Any
about
other
earlier that, sometimes if a parent has visitation, you'll call them or talk through, integrating that child into their home and things like that. We see a lot of conflict kind of between caregivers and parents, or things like that. Do you have any tips for mediating between, let's say like the child is in the grandma's custody but has weekends with dad or something like that, you have any tips for mediating? Because a lot of times it turns into he said, she said,
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Oh, yes. This happens. I mean, this happens a lot, especially when there's a custody battle over a kid where one has it, one's trying to get more custody. You get a lot of the, almost like they tattletale on each other. Like every little thing that the other one has done, you hear about. And that is not healthy at all, because you're not in a role to play custody evaluator. And so what I always do is I have that conversation with them and I redefine my role for them. Like, I understand you're in a stressful situation and you're seeking outside support. You always want to validate first. But my role within this kid's life is to and so you giving me this information is not something that I can do anything with. I just want you to know that straight off. I'll say that. But also, it takes away from what my goal is with your child. You need me for this part of your child's life. And if I'm caught up in other matters that I have no say in, then you're taking the focus off what I'm there to do for you and your child, and kind of helping them understand that they're not benefiting their child in any way. But really, you have to set some strong boundaries. I have just found that. Redefining your role 3 or 4 times if you need to, and setting the boundaries that says, look, you cannot text me this information. Like, this is the kind of stuff I would love a text from, and this is the kind of stuff that I just can't accept that you text me from anymore. And then it's also reminding them that that child may be in that person's care at some point. Say mom and dad are battling over kiddo, but ultimately joint custody is awarded. You want your child to feel safe. Say you're mom and you want kiddo full time. You got to realize there's a possibility dad's going to get that kiddo. Do you really want that kid to feel frightened and afraid and scared and at harm's way every time they're with dad? Because that may happen, that they're with dad and you've set them up to be miserable and afraid and fearful when in dad's presence. And then the other thing is, there's a possibility that you have to share custody with grandma or mom, or maybe you even have to give up custody. Maybe your grandma and they're going back to mom or back to dad. You want to have a relationship with that child, obviously. But if you've had a contentious battle with them, you're setting yourself up to be removed from that child's life when they do return to that parent. If I'm grandma and I've done nothing but tear down mom, because in good intentions, most of the time it does come from good intentions, but I've torn down mom. Well, now all of a sudden mom gets kiddo. I may not see kiddo ever again because mom's going to withhold from me because of our relationship. So I think you've got to prepare your people to know, like, you know what you're fighting for, but here's an alternate outcome, and think about the ramifications of your behaviors now should that alternate outcome occur. And so helping them to realize that, and to realize that this is an opportunity to teach your child healthy conflict management. We're always going to be in conflict with one another. And if kiddo sees grandma and mom fighting over them all the time, they don't understand what it's like to resolve conflict in a healthy way. And in fact, they might even view themselves as an object. Like, I'm just an object in their dispute. You need to have integrity so that they see they have firsthand experience of how to healthily resolve a conflict with someone. And who better to do it than the caregivers in their life? You know, we make the biggest impact. And if we're teaching them to yell and scream and sling mud at other people, are we really going to be surprised that they're in fights at school all the time and beating people up when they disagree with them? No, we taught them that. We taught them to be aggressive to get what we want. So, you know, kind of setting boundaries, defining your role, teaching them the consequences of their actions, and reminding them of the learning opportunity they have for their child, that the teaching opportunity they have for their child at that moment. Those have been really successful because this does come up a lot. And it can be, and another thing I caution against is falling into it, because we sometimes will fall into it and we'll start to see one parent as awful based on the information we've been given. And then we have an interaction with that parent and we're like, oh my gosh, that was nothing like what I thought. You always have to remember that information being brought to you is always from a biased source. Good intentions or not, we all have biases in our opinions. So it is very hard for us to present factual, bias-free information. And so always take information with that understanding that there is a bias and internal motivation for what is being said. So you as the CASA or me as a therapist, it's very important that we remain objective and that neutral third party that we are brought in to be. We have to make sure we remain that. Any other questions? These are great questions. I'm loving it. I told you I could talk all day. Anybody else? I want to make sure we have plenty of time before we talk and move on to caregiving. I mean, the support group. No, no, last chance. Okay, I've got to figure out how to minimize my screen so I can pull back up my presentation, because somehow I made the whole thing big, and my presentation that I've been going off is hidden from me. And so, oh, there we go. Figured it out. Okay.
And Kimberly, while you're
Uh-huh.
pulling that up, I'm going to ask everybody on the meeting to type in the chat your name so that we have a roster of attendance.
Yes.
Everyone will get 2 hours of their continuing education. And then, if you think of other questions, go ahead and type those in the chat as well. And we can still ask Kimberly before we're off the call.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was this support group that we offer to our caregivers. We've been doing this pre-COVID, and we're going to go ahead and start it back up and just do it virtual. It is a great opportunity for parents to connect with other parents that are going through the exact same experiences. Obviously, I come from now, granted, we all have our own trauma histories. I think that's important to keep in mind. It doesn't matter who you are. You've experienced some trauma in your life, either through the death of a loved one or an interaction with someone that left a scar. So we can all relate to one another because we know what it feels like to be abandoned and rejected and hurt and put down. We know all those feelings. But in terms of what they're going through in that moment, a lot of us don't know what they're going through, and other parents do. And so that's an opportunity to get that one-on-one from someone going through it. Like, we're not just telling you from someone who's outside the situation. We're providing you with a resource from someone who's been in that exact situation. And they can somewhat validate the things that we've been talking to our caregivers with as CASA and as therapists. What I've been talking to my caregivers with, a parent might come in and validate that and say, I've really found that setting well-defined expectations for my child has been immensely helpful. Well, guess what? I just talked about that in a caregiver session with someone else last week, and now they're hearing it from a parent that has implemented it themselves. That's going to make them more motivated to implement it now because they're seeing that it worked. It wasn't just advice. It was advice that was put into practice, and it was successful advice. So that's what the experience of the caregiver support group is, just really awesome. And it can create mentorships because everyone's in a different stage in their life. You may have a parent in there that has just recently experienced a trauma within their child's life. You may have a parent who's been in it for 4 years. They can all teach each other. And these are secondary victims. I think we have to remember that when you're a caregiver to a child that's been abused or traumatized, you're a secondary victim yourself. It's going to create feelings. If your child was sexually abused as a parent, you're going to feel guilt and shame that you couldn't protect them. And it may have been completely out of your hands to protect them, but you're still going to feel guilt as a parent because you failed to protect them. And you need encouragement from someone else who's been in that exact situation to say, you're doing a great job, mama or daddy. You love your kid. It's obvious. You're putting in boundaries. There's just certain things that you have no control over. You need someone to tell you that and to help you heal from the own trauma you're experiencing just from being the caregiver to that traumatized child. And you need to have compassion for yourself and self-care for yourself, because you could unknowingly set your own child back because you're not dealing with the emotions that you have as a result of their trauma. And so what I'm really excited about this next one is that we're going to address just that. We're going to be promoting self-care and resiliency among caregivers. So we'll talk about what are some emotions you're experiencing. We're going to normalize those emotions so that this is expected and it's okay. We're going to talk about ways to address these emotions, making sure you have alone time, making sure you've set boundaries with your kids. If I know that I do not like what's a good word? I'm not good at sports. I'm going to be frustrated if my family event for the day is going and playing basketball as a family. I might be tempted to say, oh, my kids really love to play basketball. Let's go play basketball. But I'm going to get frustrated because it's not my thing. I'm not good at it. If I'm frustrated, I might have a tendency to have more of a temper and to be impatient towards my children. So a good boundary to set is having quality time with your kids, but having quality time that you know could not create feelings of tension within you or impatience within you or anger within you. You want to avoid those kind of activities because we're trying to build positive experiences. So, knowing what your boundaries are even, so that you're setting your kids up for the best experience with you as possible, taking care of your own body, eating right, sleeping right, doing your own meditation, doing your own therapy. Those are important things as a caregiver to do when you're caring for a child, any child, but especially one that's been through trauma and abuse. So those are kind of some of the things we're going to talk about at this next support group. And I really would love to see just as many parents going through all this in it as we possibly can, because it's just such an enriching experience that they have. And I'm sitting right there to help too. So it's kind of that opportunity to get a little bit of encouragement from both sides of it, from your fellow parents and from the therapist that's sitting there working with you in your case. So I hope people can come. Now I want to have time to do the live stream. Did anyone have questions about the support group? Not hearing any.
How do they register for it? How will they get the Zoom link?
So what we'll do is that if you either call up to the office or you email me or you send me a call through my personal phone, I'll put you on the list, and then I will either text you the link, like you can get it through your email or you can get it through text. So you do have to kind of reach out to me. My personal work cell phone number is 270-331-3500. So if anyone is wanting to sign up or to pass on that information to someone that they would like to sign up, give them that number, because you can text me on it, you can call me on it. It's my direct number. Again, it's 270-331-3500. And we like to know how many will be there, because we want to obviously because we could do rapport building activities amongst parents, and so we need to know how many pairs there would be, or kind of get an idea for what are the different experiences that people are going to be bringing into the setting, so that I can be prepared for what might need some intervention or what might need to be more of a focus depending upon our exact support group. I see a question, when is our support group? Yes, let me pull up that information. I've already got it scheduled, so I'm just pulling out my calendar. The support group is going to be February 22nd from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So February 22nd, 5 to 6. And I see a bunch of people have put their names in there. I'm going to also check the questions. It says, will a flyer be posted on Childwatch Facebook page? Yes. Dave Thompson has the information. I told him what the discussion points would be and what the discussion topic would be. And I gave that to him, and he will be putting that flyer together and then sending that flyer out and posting it. And it looks like Stephanie is saying it will also be in the e-newsletter as well. So let's see, I think that was all the typed questions. And so now we know. Okay, so I'll leave more, we'll have more time to do questions if anyone thinks of any, but I was really wanting to kind of lead you through a relaxation technique. It won't be the one we'll do in the group support group, because we'll probably do a little bit longer of one, and it can take up to 20 minutes. Or it could take, less, but I just wanted to give y'all an idea. So I'm it's like a 5-minute relaxation intervention. And I'm going to do it with you so that no one feels awkward or anything. And it's called Light Stream. And there's all different variations of this, but what it basically is it's breathing and it's adding visualization to it. So some people will imagine that as they're breathing in, they're pulling all the toxic stuff they have into one spot. And then as they're breathing out, they're breathing it out. I like to imagine it like that. Like every breath I take is black tar coming from all extremities of my body, pulling in my chest, and then I breathe it out and get it out of me. Well, this one is where we're going to introduce something calming while we're breathing. And we're going to start by closing our eyes. So I'm going to do it with you. So we're going to close our eyes and we're just going to take 3 deep breaths so that we get in the habit of these deep breaths. So breathe in through your nose and hold it just a few seconds and breathe out. And try to count to maybe 5. It's not specific, but just breathe in and hold it and breathe out. Let's do it again. Breathe in and hold it. Breathe out. Let's do one more. Breathe in and hold it. Breathe out. And I want you to keep doing it, but I also want you to start becoming aware of your body, noticing where your legs are, the seat that's underneath you and the pressure it causes on the bottom of your legs. Feel your toes and the weight of your feet just falling onto the ground, or if you have them crossed, just resting on that seat. Notice your posture. If you're really rigid, then just let it go. Start relaxing, drop the shoulders. We're still breathing in. We're holding. And breathing out. Kind of roll around, get your body in as comfortable position as possible. Dangle your arms, lay them on your lap. Still breathing in deep. Holding and breathing out. And now I want you to imagine that coming in from your head and your fingertips and your toes is this bright light. And make it whatever color feels the most calming to you. For some, it's a golden stream of light. For some, it's blue. Something very relaxing. And then imagine that's coming in, starting all these extremities, and it's just traveling. It's going down into your shoulders, this really bright light, into your arms, down into your legs and your feet. And I want you to start imagining a heat that comes with this light. So it's all in your body because it's come in, and now it's warming you up from the inside. I want you to feel that heat in your toes. Work your way up. Feel it in your calves, that warm, comforting light. And it travels up to your stomach. It's up in your chest. It's in your head. Taking those deep breaths in and holding, releasing. Now imagine you're inviting more light in, more warmth. It's coming in. I want you to take a few deep breaths and just feel that warmth and feel that light. If you start to get distracted, that's all right. Just bring it back. Get out of your head, get back into your body, feeling that warmth. And I want you to start observing, is that warmth everywhere? And has it caused you to feel relaxed? If you find a spot that doesn't feel quite so relaxed, invite some more of that warmth and that light into that area. So if those shoulders are feeling tense, invite that warm feeling to just come across your chest and your collarbone. If you're feeling that tension in your back, invite that light and that warmth to your back. Still deep breathing. A few more deep breaths. And as you're ready, start to bring awareness back to your body. Wiggle those toes a little bit. Wiggle the shoulders and the head. Start to feel the air that's on you right now. Notice the temperature that's around you. Are you in a hot or cold place right now? Start to feel those sensations. Feel your clothes, or if you're holding a blanket, feel that. And then when you're ready, slowly open your eyes back up. I'll give everyone a moment. So what's so great about that is it's a reset. There's so much stimulation in our environment, lights, sounds, responsibilities, lists of things that we need to get done and accomplished. And we need to reset and have a moment where we just feel ourselves. We're a person. We're not our task for the day. We're not our responsibilities for the day. Get in touch with our breathing and our body sensations and relax them. Get out of that head for a minute, because we're constantly judging ourselves or constantly saying, what's the next thing? Take that breath, because if you don't, whatever you had in that first experience, you'll carry. And you'll start to carry it throughout the day. And imagine it's like a backpack. You start out and you added one thing in from one part of life. You move to the next and you're bringing in that baggage from that part. And by the end of the day, you have an overwhelming backpack that's heavy and cumbersome and dragging you down. But if you could stop and take those 5 minutes, it took 5 minutes, and unload that backpack before you move to the next one, you'll come in refreshed, lightweight, ready to go. So I'm so glad we could do that. We've got a few more minutes. Were there any other questions?
Dave Thompson asked on the chat, have you ever used the Little Unicorn books before to teach children about breathing exercises and visualizations?
You know, I have actually heard of them. They actually have all kinds of little animals that they use to teach that. No, unfortunately, I have not used those. They sound like a great resource. What I love about them is that a parent could use it without having to have a therapist sitting there telling them what to do, or even they don't even have to have gone to therapy to be taught the kind of script. So those sound like a great resource. And I would love to kind of look into them. What I love just about relaxation therapy is it can be modified in so many ways. Like what I just did with you is one version of probably thousands. And once you know the basics, you don't have to have a perfect script. It doesn't have to go the same way every time. You don't have to say the same things every time. It's just making sure that you're focusing on the breathing and shutting out the thoughts and pulling your awareness to your body. And so I think that's what some of those little books do is, they make it fun. It's not got to be a strict, uptight little thing that has to be said a certain way. I didn't follow a script. I've just done it so many times and I modify it. So it's great.
Well, Kimberly, I just want to thank you so much. You gave us so much good information. And it's great that we are kind of working under the same organization so that if we have more questions, things that come up in y'all's cases, that we have access to just continue this conversation. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to let the CASAs know. And Laura has one more question. So go ahead and ask,
Yeah.
Laura.
That was just one of those little applause.
Oh, she was
Sorry.
applauding me. Thank you. Thank you. I was nervous because goodness, I've got to learn how to pare things down. I could do a 4-hour conference. Did I hit everyone's points? I know there were a lot of questions and some things I focus on really heavily and some things not as much, but if anyone had something that wasn't addressed, or if I didn't address it to your full means, you can either ask it now or feel free to email me later because I love to talk.
And I was just going to share your email address because that's a really good way to ask questions since you have busy schedules with your therapy clients back to back on some days. That'll give you time, to really answer their questions. So it's like all of the other CASA staff, but it's K Hines, HINES at childwatchcac.org. So you can definitely reach out to her by email anytime. And I just wanted to let the CASAs know, just to be looking out for your February news that's coming out pretty soon because we have several different trainings coming up in February. We're going to do a roundtable discussion on the evening of the 8th, where we're going to actually get our CASAs kind of for an informal conversation and break you off into small groups on Zoom so that you can just kind of get to know each other and talk about some, common questions that come up on your cases. Then one of our CASAs is going to be doing a training for us at the end of February, kind of talking about confidentiality and things like that. And then Jen is going to be doing a fostering futures training for those who haven't gone through that training about working with teenagers specifically. So just be looking out for your e-news. We're also going to share the caregiver support group flyer and the link for the mental health progress report. And you can always, like I said, reach out to me or Kimberly, if you have any other questions. So just thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time, and you'll each be getting a certificate with your training credit. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I really valued this opportunity to kind of meet with all of you and talk with you. And I'm glad we had such a good turnout rate. That's great. Y'all are awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.